Okay, guys, so today we're privileged to have on our podcast Anti-Prophet, a scarier looking guest than, but he's a very sweet person that we usually have in this new podcast of ours, but it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're really, really curious about his story and his goals and his content creation process. So we're going to talk to Anti-Prophet about all this. Welcome, Anti-Prophet.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to get into it.
First question, AP, why are you wearing a mask?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I first started my brand a few years ago, before I got any followers or views or anything like that, I actually had to post anonymously. I knew that going into this project because I was working as a COO for another very, very large YouTube channel, and I knew that this particular content creator would not want me representing his channel with some of the stuff that I talk about. So as a result of that, I started thinking like, okay, how can I do this anonymously? And I ended up just hopping online and finding this mask. And, I think in retrospect, it makes sense that I picked this mask because my content is always set up in such a way to encourage people to simply consider their own personal beliefs. I really have no interest in telling people what to believe, which is why I called myself Anti-Prophet. And I think this white blank mask is really, really great because even though I wasn't consciously thinking of this at the time, when you come across my content, it's not just another face on social media trying to shove an opinion down your throat. It's a blank slate looking back at you onto which you can project any of your feelings, any of your thoughts onto, and to hopefully get a deeper insight into what it is that you actually think about XYZ topic.
You gave me an answer to my next question, kind of why Anti-Prophet?
I chose the name Anti-Prophet very specifically. I wanted to put people in a place where they stopped gravitating towards gurus online and started to take a look within in order to find the answers that they or find answers to the questions that they had about their own lives. And as a result of that, whenever I share an opinion on Anti-Prophet, and I share a lot of opinions, the goal is to elicit an emotional reaction from you in one way or another. But if it is an opinion that you disagree with, for example, what my content is set up to do is to force the viewer to consider their own position. And, if they interact with my content by leaving a comment or something like that, it forces them to articulate what it is that they believe and why it is that they disagree with me, which is better in terms of overall society. Because if you can articulate clearly and effectively what it is that you think about any, particular political issue, you are able to go into the real everyday conversations in your life with a lot more groundedness and level-headedness, which in my mind brings us closer together societally in a period of time when I think there's a lot of polarization. There's a lot of yelling back and forth.
Well, you see, guys, that he's much nicer than he looked. He wants to build bridges. So you're telling me the opinions, which are sometimes very controversial, that you share on your page and your multiple pages you are on multiple social media, the opinions that you share are not actually your opinions. They're here just to provoke a debate, or they happen to be your opinions, and you frame them in such a way that triggers a process of self-reflection with the audience.
They're definitely all my opinions. I never post anything that I don't agree with. Ultimately, Anti-Prophet is just like the entire purpose of this brand is so that I can hop on camera and talk shit into a camera. Like that's just kind of what I want to do.
Why Anti-Prophet? Why the religious connotation? Why not anti-politician, anti-guru? Why do you choose that? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it's probably this. It's just everyone is going. I shouldn't say everyone. Everyone who is hurting flocks to social media in order to flock around someone who they feel like can help them make sense of the world. And there is a religious connotation to that. The person who has done that historically is someone who has a religious connotation to their title. And as a result of it, I didn't want to use sort of like a modern term like guru or like politician or thinker, like anti-thinker or something like that. I don't know. I wanted to invoke a quasi-religious element into what it is that I'm doing, because I think the way that we interact on social media when we are either when we're hurting or even when we're not hurting, just any of the content that we end up bringing in does end up having a quasi-religious effect on us. We're all participating in, macro memes that historically, in order for a meme to get from, the North American continent all the way to China, that's the type of thing that would have to be so powerful and be so thought-provoking that it lasted over the course of like decades or hundreds of years in order to like make its way all the way over to the other side of the world. But now we live in a culture where somebody can create a meme of some type, and because of the instantaneous nature of social media, that content is blasted all over the world and people participate in that meme. So again, I do believe that there's sort of a religious element to all of this.
You said something interesting. You started your elaboration by saying people who are hurting. Is this your audience? Do you feel you're speaking specifically to people who are hurting, who are confused? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to replace the gurus to an extent? I'm curious why you use that term.
Well, I'll say this, and this is going to require a little bit of background. Anti-Prophet was originally built off of, if I'm being honest, kind of alt-right, quasi-fascist ideology. And that was because I myself was going through like kind of a difficult time. I don't think it's any coincidence that I built out Anti-Prophet on this, on an ideology that centers itself around disgust. I genuinely think that fascism is built around the feeling of disgust for yourself and for the people around you. I don't think it's any coincidence that I built out that audience from a place of feeling disgusted with myself because of the place that I was in terms of my mental health. Now, within the last like 6 or 7 months, I've really posted completely like different content. Certainly in terms of like political ideology, it's like a complete 180. And that's just because I feel happier. I've taken time to actually kind of deal with some of those things that were hurting me over the last like half decade, and as a result, I feel like I'm a lot happier as a result, and that has been much to the chagrin of many of my audience members. Most of my followers on YouTube are very angry about my political ideology change.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So it's very rare, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on That's Why Show. Is I'm talking to a recovering quasi-fascist, conspiracy theorist-oriented alt-right guy, right? And that's very rare. And you said something fascinating. You said, like, fascism is built on disgust and disgust for oneself to start with. Can you elaborate on that? What did it give you when you're in this low place in your life where you, as you said, feel disgust? What did the alt-right give you?
Alt-right ideology does a really good job of saying, hey, like even though you're in a shitty place right now, you could be better. And as a result of that, people are like, oh, you know what? Fuck yeah, I could be better. And that's a good thing. I don't think that's actually a bad thing. However, when the ideology never stops at saying, okay, this is enough, but you could always be better, it results in a constant self-hatred of who you are. And if you're starting from a ground zero of like where you hate yourself. I mean, the reason why I hated myself, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, is just because I was going through a really difficult time in life. I had just recently got divorced. I had just ended the 2 major friendships in my life. Like these were the 2 people in like my lineup at my wedding. My dad had passed away 18 months before. COVID had just happened, so I just lost my job. I was living back in my mother's basement at the age of 29. Like my entire like life fell apart. You know what I mean? And the thing that I did during that period of time, which again, I don't think is a bad thing, is I chose to view myself as the problem and to take responsibility for everything that happened to me in order to dig myself out of the hole. But when you choose to not take the victimhood stance and you view yourself as the problem in order to get better, when does that cycle end? When do you stop viewing yourself as the problem? And the funny thing is, like, the way that we treat people around us is simply a reflection of the way we treat ourselves. If we are disgusted with who we are as people, we are inherently going to be disgusted with everyone around us. We're just projecting our own problems out onto the world. This is something that Carl Jung did a really good job of kind of establishing in the psychological literature, the idea of projection. I think that's probably where all of this came from originally, and where I think alt-right thinking does get to the place where it does indeed become toxic, because you just end up projecting your pain onto the people around you if you don't ever kind of get off the train.
And the alt-right gives you solutions to that, right? So how does it work? What do they tell you, all these alt-right influencers? How do they manage to make your life better? What do they tell you you should fix within yourselves or your relationships to be successful, to be happy in relationships, etc.?
So I'll actually start with the good stuff, and I'll use that as a segue into the bad stuff. So the good stuff is that, alt-right ideology is really like high on the idea that having self-respect and having like personal boundaries is a positive. Those are not negative things. And the place that I was coming from beforehand is I didn't have a lot of self-respect and I had zero boundaries. So that's a good thing, right? There's nothing wrong with that. The other thing that a lot of alt-right thinking tends to espouse is that you should go out of your way to try and better yourself and your financial life as much as you possibly can. How can you become so good at business that money just kind of ends up flowing to you, all right? Another thing that it espouses is, go and get in shape. It's good to be in shape, and in order for you to actually use your mind as effectively as you can, you have to take care of your body as well. One cannot work without the other. So now, the inversion of all of these things. Let's start with the first one. In the realm of having boundaries and having self-respect, what far-right ideology, and specifically the red pill, tends to do is it takes that and turns it up to like level 20. And what that ends up turning out to be in a real relationship is you controlling the people around you, because you no longer have boundaries between yourself and others. Your boundaries are starting to pull other people in. Red pill takes that to the furthest extreme to basically say that like women need to do everything that men tell them to do. That's red pill. In the realm of working out, again, it's nice to be in shape. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you start to see the world through the lens of physical power is the only thing that matters, and ethics and truth and anything that we consider to be, the pillars of society in terms of like how we like relate with people, if physical power is the number one thing that actually matters, then you end up with people like Andrew Tate, who people only flock to because they feel like he could beat up another person. If anyone takes a look at like anything that the guy says, they realize that this dude is just completely full of shit because he contradicts himself literally on the daily, and he's confessed to like being a human trafficker like over 100 times on camera, but people still flock to him because he is, in their mind, the archetype of what a man should be to, someone who has the psychology of a 13-year-old boy, because he's big, he's powerful. And as a result, that physical power is the thing that they want to optimize around. And then in the realm of money, I think, that one is just kind of goes farther in the direction of doing anything and everything for money, whether that involves scamming people, whether that involves creating products that don't actually need to exist in the first place. Alex Karp just came out with a book. This is the CEO of Palantir. I actually don't really like the book. It's pretty boring, and I think he's just shilling his own company throughout the most of it. But he makes an interesting point that, at a certain point, Silicon Valley stopped creating products that would make a difference in America and started simply shilling out products that would make the consumer feel good and make the consumer more money. Silicon Valley started focusing on meta ads as opposed to companies that would keep America competitive in the 21st century in terms of like the way that we conduct like our military technology, reaching the stars. You know, these types of endeavors require like a national cohesive national identity and a pride in one's nation in order to actually get off the ground when you're kind of partnering with the government and corporations. And it might feel like I'm getting a little bit off track, but the point that I'm trying to make here is this: is when you optimize around making as much money as possible, you no longer ask the question of should I make this? You ask the question of whether will this make money? And if it does, and if it will, then yes, we should build it. And the should is focused on like very, very different things than I think, you know, the should be. So yeah, I think that's probably my summary of all three.
Well, that's an incredible summary. And what struck me, I want to go back to multiple things, including Nietzsche, because it's going to get nerdy and pompous, but that's obviously the author that came to mind when you talked about excellence and power and domination, etc., or at least the vulgate of Nietzsche, what people think Nietzsche thinks. But at first, what you're describing is a form of fascism that is actually individualistic and capitalistic.
If you noticed over the last like maybe 10 minutes of this conversation, I've been using the word alt-right, not fascism.
Correct. You used that term at the very beginning. It was, I used it.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I kind of make that distinction is because everything that I just described is very like alt-right, and some of it makes its way into fascism. The only reason why I called myself like a quasi-fascist, middle of last year, is because my solution for solving all of the goals of like the alt-right in my mind was for a really strong administration to basically declare martial law in the U.S. and go in and basically clean house. So that's why I say fascist. Otherwise, all of the other stuff that we're talking about, certain elements of its way make its way into fascism in terms of like the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of like traditional beauty over postmodernism, I guess. But yeah, I try and make a pretty clear distinction between alt-right and fascism. It's just if you become fascist if you want the state to basically make your goals a reality.
Got it. That's a great distinction. Thanks for saying that, because obviously, yeah, fascism has this, is nothing without the state, or it would have to be redefined. But it's funny or interesting to track the similarities between the two. Do you think it's a difference of degree or a difference of nature fundamentally? Do you think the alt-right that is individualistic and capitalistic and doesn't talk about the state so much these days is a first step towards fascism? It's a big question. A lot of political theorists right now are grappling with, especially in the relationship between Musk and Trump. Musk, the capitalist, individualist, maybe a little libertarian at first, and Trump, who right now is the state. Who wins the battle between the two? Who serves whom? Is this a new alliance between authoritarianism and capitalism that we will need new terminology, new words to name? Or is this gonna lead to the defeat of one camp over the other, as in like the state using capitalism to establish an authoritarian type of regime, or eventually capitalism dismantling the state to continue to rule in a more brutal way? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that question is a little bit too in the abstract in terms of like what's actually happening in reality on the ground, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, okay, cool. But in terms of where do we go moving forward? I think I don't know, the most compelling two ideas that I've come across again come from very different sides of the political spectrum. Alexander Dugin, who a lot of people credit to be like sort of this conspiracy theorist, far right philosopher who most real philosophers don't really take seriously, and kind of for good reason. He has this idea called the fourth political theory, which is a very vague idea that, in order to move forward, what we're going to need to do is to basically draw from the three forms of governance that have come before and basically take the best parts of each one and reject the rest. And what that means is we're going to take the best parts of fascism, we're going to take the best parts of liberalism, and we're going to take the best parts of communism in order to figure out how to move forward. So again, regardless of whatever your thoughts
what could
are
go
about,
wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong, right? Regardless of your thoughts on Dugin, I like everything is.
I don't know the guy, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, regardless of anyone's thoughts watching this of Dugin, any political ideology that comes in the future is always going to be dependent on the things that came before it. So it's not like he's saying anything like super groundbreaking or revolutionary or whatever there. So that's the far right influence, I guess, on me. The far left influence is from I think his name. I always fuck his name up. Yanis Varoufakis or Yanis Varoufakis, one of the
Yanis
two.
Varoufakis is the former, if I'm not wrong, he's the former Minister of the Economy in Greece, right? You're talking about the same guy.
Yeah, same guy. So this guy is a self-proclaimed communist, and he has a really, really interesting book by the name of Technofeudalism. And his whole idea there is that this marriage between the state and commerce is a result of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the economic order of the world set up post like 48, 49, somewhere around there. And what it has evolved into is basically companies like Amazon, like Meta, like Apple, becoming so large because of the excesses of government and the ability of the government to bail large corporations out at the beginning of the 2008 financial crisis. These companies got access to so much capital that they were able to kind of, blitzkrieg the growth of their businesses, where they didn't actually have to be profitable in the beginning because they knew that amassing the amount of data that they're sitting on now would be the new oil of the 21st century. And as a result of them being able to kind of build companies in the ways that they were, where profit no longer mattered, and to a certain extent still don't matter, what this has kind of set up is they were able to provide so many awesome things to the public for free in exchange for data that they've created these techno-feudal societies to a certain degree, where if you are a seller on Amazon, Amazon has the total rights to basically wipe you off the face of the earth from their platform whenever they want without explanation. And in order to participate in that mini feudalist society, you have to pay, you basically pay like taxes, let's say, to the feudal lord of Jeff Bezos by giving him all of your data, so that data can be used to sharpen the algorithm so that you engage with the platform more, so that it can learn even more data, learn even more things from you from the data that you give it, so that you use the platform more, buy more shit, and it's just this never-ending cycle of more and more and more and more and more data. So again, where we go from here, I'm not entirely sure. There's the very low-resolution version of Alexander Dugin on the right with the fourth political theory. There's the idea that we're already inside of a techno-feudalist society. That techno-feudalism was the thing that actually killed capitalism. I don't know.
Absolutely. Parts of my question on the relationship between capitalism and authoritarian state with techno-feudalism, but basically what you're saying is, and we made a video about that recently on That's Why, a few months ago. The beauty, the power of techno-feudalism is that it's not just exploiting you when you work, it's also exploiting you in your free time. So when you're getting entertained, when you're scrolling on social media, it's actually extracting value from you in the form of data, whilst paralyzing you through addiction to entertainment and short form content on social media in particular.
And like feudal societies, like it doesn't have to pay you either. Like
It doesn't have to pay.
It's
Absolutely. That's
it's
yeah.
getting value from you for free. Like Marx's theory of labor completely goes out the window because like there's no payment of any labor here. Like you are incentivized to actually provide the resources to these large techno-feudal mini societies.
I just want to circle back to just continue your story, which is probably going to be our common thread throughout this podcast. In your alt-right days, what's the craziest thing you've seen online? What's the craziest theory, craziest tip, craziest influencer you've seen? Like just, just an anecdote that right now probably could make you laugh, but that would exemplify for people who have no idea what this means to be in those in those circles, in those spheres, what the alt-right is about.
Do you know what if alt hist Rudyard whatever his name is? Have you come across this channel?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, well, so he had a bit of a mental breakdown, I think back in December, and then tried to play it off like it was some sort of like social experiment when it very clearly wasn't. The dude thought he was possessed by Wotan, and was basically the next coming of like this Germanic, if I remember correctly, was like the next coming of like some Germanic god trying to exact its will of vengeance upon the world or something like that. And the reason I'm sharing this is because the psychological state in which I got to this time last year wasn't far off from that. A lot of these like alt-right spaces do kind of have, again, a quasi-religious element to them. It's the type of thing where not only is your job to go and make yourself as excellent as possible in order to make society as excellent as possible, it is like your duty, whether that's to like Jesus Christ or to like the pagan gods or whatever, and in order to go out and do that. And these forces, whether you actually believe that they're like legitimate gods or not, or if there's psychological forces inside of you that are like connected to like the collective unconscious, something Jungian, or if it is you going and fulfilling Nietzsche's dream of the Overman, of the Übermensch. It really doesn't matter. Like there's a quasi-religious element to this where you feel like you are one of the main players in this cosmic game, which then provides significance to your life, which is important to you when you are hurting, because you're likely trying to artificially put that significance onto your life with this crazy kind of internal conspiracy theory, because your life isn't all that significant in the first place, and that is like ripping you apart. So, I only say this because, again, I think this is a little bit stronger of an idea of not just like where I was psychologically, but I think where a lot of young guys are in terms of the way that they even interact with this content. We just think like, oh, it's just a reel, it's just a TikTok, it's just a YouTube video. But I think a lot of young guys are having like psychological breakdowns that are quasi-religious because they're trying to grasp onto something that makes them feel significant in a sea of insignificance because of the way that modern society is set up.
That's very powerful what you're saying. Basically, it stems, if I understand correctly, stems from, if we turn to the alt-right, stems from a lack of social recognition and self-significance on the part of those young guys. You tied it to modern society. What is the problem here? Is it individualism, as in the ultimately lone guy in front of his computer, after we moved from what, it's going to be nerdy again, sociologist Weber called the disenchantment of the world, and moving from, and Durkheim called moving from an organic society to a non-organic society that has solidarity that is less between people but more mediated by the state, leaving us ultimately, I'm summarizing it, leaving us ultimately alone. Is that the problem? Is kind of like individualism eating itself? I'm just trying to identify what, and you said modern society, what in modern society kind of led us to that point, because you're very critical of religion, But one could argue that religion and other ideologies and kind of old school forms of wisdom were binding people together in a way that was shielding them from that loneliness, that feeling of insignificance, and therefore turning to the alt-right.
To your point, I think the answer is indeed yes. There was a certain type of social cohesion that actually was very, very important that we got from the Judeo-Christian religion in the West that tied us together in a very, very real way. And once we started throwing out those religious symbols, we were left with a vacuum, and we're still dealing with like how to fill that vacuum, and we haven't found an answer to that. But the thing that's worth saying here is whether or not you think that religion is the answer to having real community and real connection in the world is dependent on whether or not you think that there is something past religion that can give you something even deeper. And that really kind of gets into whether or not like most people even have the ability to go past religion. And I don't know. That's something that I'm still kind of dealing with. Like, does every single person in the world have the ability to actually individuate, or are there people who are just never going to get there, and religion is going to be the thing that like kind of keeps them going from day to day? I hope that the answer to that is sort of a blend of the two things, because if there are people who just will never get to a place where they're able to individuate, those people are going to end up being lost to the annals of history because they're not going to be able to transition into what's coming. And I think I have too much, maybe too much naive love for people in the world to go back to my fascist beliefs that there are excellent people and there are unexcellent people, and that it is the state's job to eradicate the unexcellent people. I know unexcellent isn't a word. I'm kind of using it satirically there, but
I like it. Basically, summarizing, weren't we better off with the social cohesion that pre-enlightenment, pre-industrialization world, including religion, gave us? And you said, well, probably not. I mean, now is the time to, as you said, individuate. And in the words of philosopher Alan Finkielkraut, create individuals that are their own foundation, right? As opposed to looking for a meaning outside of the individual that would give meaning to our lives. And it's a fundamentally atheist and utilitarian view of the world. There's this sociologist and philosopher Eva Illouz, again, sorry, French ones, that says that self-recognition is by definition a lie because recognition can only come from outside of you. I'm not sure I agree with that, but that kind of fuels that discussion that we're probably not going to have here. But it's check out Hume, check out Eva Illouz, check out Durkheim. I want to get back to, again, continuing the thread of your own personal story. When did you stop believing in conspiracy theories? And how did you stop believing in conspiracy theories? I should say.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I stopped. I think I just picked classier ones, more interesting ones. The real question is, when did I stop interfacing with conspiracy theories as if I was getting a real look behind the curtain that no one else was privy to? Because that's the thing that makes conspiracy theories dangerous. Because again, once you get access to information that like the normies don't know, then you start to view yourself above other people because other people are sheep. And the reason you're doing that in the first place is because you have to manufacture a certain level of narcissistic supply in your life if you don't have any. That's totally normal. Human beings just have to do that. They have to feel significant to a certain degree. But if you really don't have any of that, and then your entire supply of narcissistic supply is built around having access to information that nobody else does, and that makes you superior to them, then your entire identity is built around that. In a way that becomes really, really dangerous. There was a really great film that came out a little bit earlier this year Dear Casey, I think that's the name of it. But it's the Andrew Callahan, the guy from Channel 5 News, the YouTube channel, uh, made a little documentary about a guy whose life just kind of completely fell apart because he just jumped so hard into MAGA. And it's an unbelievable look into what everything that I just talked about can really do to a person, and how how much pain you have to be willing to go through in order to pull yourself out of that mode of thinking. Because in order to like function in reality again, you have to be willing to let go of everything in your world that makes you feel significant. And that's a tall order.
So basically, what you're saying is that the way you got out of at least some form of conspiratorial thinking is basically by building your self-worth somewhere else. So you didn't have to take it all from the feeling of being above the sheep that conspiracy theories give you. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much. It was really as a result of me just kind of deepening my relationship with myself, because whether or not I was more privy to information that other people didn't have became irrelevant. Like, I wasn't basing like my happiness, my worldview, my view of myself on what other people thought of me. Uh, and I think the biggest symbol of me being willing to sacrifice that is, again, me doing a full 180 on my channel. Like, that was not a comfortable thing. It's not like it's been incredibly profitable for me to do that 180 shift. Like, a lot of my audience like really hates me. And the people who probably would have done business with me at the beginning and like bought my like products or whatever, no longer have any interest in doing so. You know what I mean? And you could make the argument that, I've attracted a new audience that might be interested in what it is that I do and want to do business with me. But those people are ultimately going to be disappointed as well moving forward, because I get the sense that because I've attracted an audience from just endlessly criticizing Andrew Tate, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, I'm just attracting like communist tankies, you know what I mean? And then once the pendulum swings in the other direction politically and I start talking shit, people are going to be mad again and I'm going to have to start over. But again, it's more important for me to say what it is that I believe to be true, rather than for me to be liked. And I guess I'll say one last thing here is, I think, again, a lot of my view of myself was found inside of how my audience viewed me. Because the thing that allowed me to make money, the thing that allowed me to feel significant, was these people. And as a result of that, like, I was selling a high ticket product at the time that was selling, like, it wasn't even a high ticket, it was like $2,500, so like mid ticket or so. But very early on into that selling process, I realized that in order for my products to sell, I had to get hundreds of thousands of views on those videos where I was talking about the product. And as a result of that, I had to show people what it is that they wanted to see and what it is that I knew they agreed with, regardless of whether or not I really agreed with it. And, this is something that I think a lot of content creators run into, and whether or not they become consciously aware of it or not, their entire identity gets like caught up in not what they think about themselves and what they want to put out onto social media, but what their audience wants from them. Because if they don't do that, their money goes away, their views go away, which means that like their standard of living goes away, and their view of themselves, like their feeling of significance goes away. So these are all things that I really had to like let go of over the last like 6 months. And again, it was not comfortable and it was not profitable, but I was still willing to do it because that's more important to me than doing the opposite, which again is, I think, one of the big reasons why even when I interact with conspiracy theories at this point, I don't do so in a way that is harmful to me as an individual.
What's the difference? So what's the relationship that's okay and the relationship that's harmful with conspiracy theorists? How would you very quickly differentiate between the two? I guess that would be the difference between conspiratorial thinking and critical thinking. Is that a good depiction of it?
Yeah, I think I'll say two things about the way that I interface with conspiracy theories at this point. I engage with them the same way that I engage with like a hilarious meme on X. I'm like, oh my god, this is hilarious, and then I like show to someone else, right? It's not like I'm going around like trying to infect the background of all of the videos that I'm putting out on social media in order to like kind of like not so subtly guide them in the direction of a certain political ideology, right? On a more serious note, interfacing with like different ways of viewing the world is ultimately useful if you are willing to update your thinking when you come across new information. I always like to feel like I'm learning something new.
But is it information though? These types of theories. Is it sorry to interrupt, but is this information, or does it intellectually give you just stimulation and better reasons to believe what you already believe as a kind of a counterpart? Because it's not properly speaking information. At least it's a theory.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know if I would
I
make a
don't know if I would
distinction
make a
between
distinction
like
between like a
and
theory and
information.
information.
Maybe
Maybe
you
you
could
could
on
on
a
a
philosophical level. I'm trying to
philosophical
think of
level.
like a philosopher that would take issue with what I just said. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
I mean, it's
This is what I
basically
would,
facts versus unproven
yeah.
facts.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
theories of a fact.
Yeah. For sure. Well, therein lies the difference, right? I don't approach these things as facts. I can't.
Yeah. Okay.
If I
Got it.
do,
No, yeah.
I become miserable, actually. And the reason why is, I learned this very early on in my life. When I was 17, I went and did this thing called the Landmark Forum, which a lot of people consider to be a cult because it kind of is. But it was one of the most transformational experiences that I had had in my life up until that point. And I still refer back to it. And if I see that someone is sort of at a certain point in life, I still recommend that people go and do it because it was like that powerful in my life, right? But, with that organization, just like any organization, the longer you stick around with a certain like dogmatic set of beliefs, the less valuable those dogmatic beliefs become over time. In the same way that when I came across Jordan Peterson back in like 2017, if I was still super diehard Jordan Peterson to this day, it would be an indication to me that I had not progressed at all psychologically and that I was holding on to something because I was afraid of what else I would find. Like it is a signal to me that I'm actually doing pretty okay when I am able to come across information and be like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is a really interesting way of like interfacing with the world. And I'm willing to update that without having like deep emotional problems about it. I mean, sometimes deep emotional problems come up, but they're good deep emotional problems. You know what I mean? When you update your worldview.
It's interesting because you're taking a mental health approach to conspiracy theories, and I don't want to overgeneralize your case, but I guess a lot of people would understand what you're saying by saying, okay, don't try to talk to a conspiracy theorist by proving them that they're wrong. Try to understand what other issues they have in their lives and fix that. Is that what you're saying? Or is it just your personal path, your personal experience of it, and you don't want to overgeneralize it? Because it does feel that, at least for certain extreme conspirationist people, it's definitely that. We were interviewing a conspiracy theories expert who was actually saying that he was not exactly making the same point. He was saying conspiracy theorists believe even more in their theories once they've been confronted with conclusive counter evidence. So you're making it worse when you bring up the facts. So don't try and do that. Try and present them with contradictions, with their own contradictions, and trigger a process of self-reflection. How do you do that? Ask questions. And you, I noticed, do that sometimes in your videos when you try and show the inner contradictions of certain conspirationist thinkers. Like you say, you're obsessed about the Epstein file, but you don't see what Andrew Tate is doing in terms of sexual misconduct. Contradiction. So triggering a process of self-reflection and then waiting on the person to hopefully get something like, oh, okay, maybe that's inconsistent. So that's one way of fighting crazy conspiracy theories. What you're saying is that fundamentally, maybe it's not in the realm of ideas, in the realm of facts, in the realms of contradictions that this fight is going to be won. It's on the mental health realm. Fix people as opposed to fix the way they're thinking, because if you fix them first, anyway, they'll end up being more robust and not fall prey to crazy conspiracy theorists. Is that what you're saying? Fundamentally, it's a mental health issue.
Well, I'll say two things. There are two ways that you can deal with conspiracy theorists in order to put them on the path of something that's perhaps a little bit healthier. The Machiavellian way of doing it is to just convince them that your conspiracy theory is cooler and that this is where the cool kids hang out. Because ultimately the people are gravitating towards other groups of people that make them feel significant. And if you can commandeer that process and basically just, I don't know, just like with those people, you can really adopt the mindset that like people believe what they're told. And as long as they get enough information in front of them that makes them feel like another team is winning or another team is like more interesting, they'll switch teams. They won't find real self-enlightenment, but that is still technically healthier if you believe that your worldview is superior to what it is that they're already doing, right? That's the Machiavellian view. The other option is if you genuinely care about people, then I wouldn't even say that's a mental health thing. That's too materialistic. It's like a spiritual thing, right? These people have to. There's a practical side to it and a spiritual side to it. The spiritual side is what we were talking about earlier in terms of Jung having a deep relationship with yourself. But in order for people to be willing to approach that process, they have to have the psychological safety of the parts of their life that are just in the real world. Their relationships with their family, their relationships with their friends, having a little bit of money that gives them some time to take off work and just fucking sit and think, right? All of those basic boxes and the box of health, right? Health, relationships, money, just the same shit everyone talks about. Those things need to be in a relatively good place in order for people to feel psychologically safe to take on the task of developing a deep relationship with themselves. If those three things were not in place when my life fell apart, if I didn't have my mom's basement and my family around me to kind of help me through that period, if I hadn't gotten an SBA emergency COVID loan that gave me $26,000 that I could just kind of coast on for a couple months. If I had been in a place where, I had cancer throughout this period, I don't know if I would have been able to get through that psychological transformation because just too much of my life would not have been working. And I think, society is set up in such a way right now where people are not healthy physically or mentally. They're not making enough money. And their relationships are a complete disaster because everyone lives online. And as a result, we're sitting here wondering why people aren't willing to, go deep with themselves. There's no ability for them to do it in the real world. So again, there's the psychological side of it, there's the spiritual side of it, and then there's the Machiavellian side of it. It just kind of depends on how you want to approach the problem yourself.
I like the Machiavellian approach. I want to talk. You mentioned Peterson and Tate, etc. I want to talk about Candace Owens. I've seen you made a few videos about her. Would you consider her alt-right?
Yeah, certainly. I would call her the woke right. These are the people who spent years complaining about woke culture on the left, but then ended up using the exact same tactics when they ascended to power on the right.
Meaning?
If not worse. That's a good question. Meaning what? Am I just using this because I heard it from someone else? That's a good question. Let me think.
I do that all the time.
Let me think. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that I could probably settle on immediately is just the fact that there's a certain holier than thou feeling from anyone that anyone considers to be woke, either on the left or on the right. I can never say his name correctly, but with the woman who Robin DiAngelo or Ibram X. Kendi or whatever, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, there is a certain holier than thou element to these people that is also extraordinarily fragile. In fact, these people are so fragile that they never actually interact with anyone outside of their bubble of people that are going to say oh my God, you're so great.
Snowflakes.
This is so good. Yeah, exactly. So I think I'd probably use woke right more than anything. But I think the title that I could actually back up is probably alt right. I mean, it's just the same that we've been talking about this entire conversation.
Absolutely. And one key thing that kind of maybe differentiates her from a lot of the alt-right is, and you called it out, anti-Semitism, which is something that is not so visible on the right these days, especially hiding behind anti-Zionism to say anti-Semitic stuff is something that is more attributed to the far or extreme left. Yeah, talk to us about that. How did you realize that was happening?
Yeah, I grew up like so first of all, my father was born in 1924. If he was still alive, he would have just turned 101 13 days ago. So, I think just because of the generation that he was born in, like I grew up my entire like childhood hearing about the Jews and like the New World Order, right? So like, I was aware of the New World Order because before it was fucking cool on the internet. So with that, I don't know. I struggled with this idea of like where anti-Semitism came from for a long time. And honestly, for a long time, I believed that like Jews were likely like this shadow cabal like running the world. And I think that's just based on, even though that like my conscious mind growing up was like, oh, Dad, you're insane, whatever. Like just because it's our parents like teaching us, it's something gets into the back of our head and, says like, hey, maybe there is something to this. And, as a result, kind of growing up, even though I would watch Alex Jones like critically whenever he would say like some of his edgier stuff, I'd be like, well, it's probably true. And this is kind of the metamorphosis that I'm talking about in terms of what I went through over the last like couple of years. But with anti-Semitism specifically, once I kind of started coming out of this, especially after October 7th, that was like really the big point at which I was like, oh my God, like this is no longer a sort of a funny meme that you say to your friends. Like there's like actually something happening out in the world that's like kind of freaky. Like whatever's happening is not good. Like once that started happening, I started thinking to myself, like, damn, well, why the fuck does everyone have a problem with the Jews? Like, why the Jews? Like, of all people that you could like possibly like project this out onto, why the Jews? And I think moving to Indonesia actually gave me some insight here because the Indonesian version of like the Jews is are groups of people that they call Chindos, Chinese Indonesians. These are very industrious people who came from China, who set up very successful businesses here that other people are just jealous of. And, you can go into, whether or not Ashkenazi Jews like have like a certain IQ and that's due to breeding or like due to like the way that they raise their kids. Like that's kind of beside the point. And you could say the exact same things about like the Chinese people, right? I think ultimately though, what people don't like are small groups of people that do better than them. And because it is a small group of people, you're able to project your hatred onto them because you ultimately don't think that they're going to do anything about it in a meaningful way to kind of fuck you over in return. And when it comes to Judaism, the other nice thing I think for most people is that Judaism is all like, I don't really want to get into this. I guess I will. But like, Nietzsche's whole idea of like slave morality coming from like the Jewish religion and the Jewish the Hebrews basically, right? That's what he called them. I think there is something to that, like the idea of giving birth to a religion that essentially says turn the other cheek when even when it's not warranted. Like to Nietzsche, that's something that only a weak individual would do. And just like anything else, right? Like we were talking about the pros and cons of like fascism at the beginning of this conversation. There are pros and cons to being the type of people who will turn the other cheek. Like you're able to get a lot out of the world by just focusing on the things that you're good at, the things that you have control over, and the things that make you happy. And there are real downsides because when you turn the cheek over and over and over, like it's not really that surprising that people like view you as a group of people that they can pick on, right? And especially when like you're very industrious, like I think everyone talks about how people in the banking system or people in Hollywood or whatever, oh, they're all Jews. Like even if it's true, all that means is that like the Jewish people are doing something right. Like what do you want? Like past that, So, and I think as a result of, again, them being industrious, them doing better than most people, and also being a small group of people, they're just the perfect target, in the same way that the Chindo community inside of Indonesia is the perfect community to target.
It's interesting that the connection between anti-Semitism and anti-Chinese, anti-Asian racism is something especially in Canada and a little bit in North America across the board. We did a video about that. Some caricatures are the same, and the common element is the minority element, and at least the perceived successful minority element in the way that racism played out. And you said, so you're kind of a recovering anti-Semite. Is that right to say? And that,
yeah, for sure, recovering anti-Semite is a good way to say that. That's actually hilarious. I'm gonna put that in my bio or something. Yeah, no, for sure. I think October 7th was like the big turning point, because again, like when you're playing around with these different, like with these ideas with like your friends, like when you're just like making jokes or whatever, like it's fine, and honestly it's kind of hilarious. But like when you actually start playing with these ideas out in reality, and you see these like ideas like really take control and really fuck people over in a very significant way, it causes you to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, what the fuck am I playing with? Like this was not at all like this was a fun like intellectual exercise. I'm not interested in like seeing like hundreds of people like fucking slaughtered. And to see, you know, so many different groups of people come out and condemn Israel with October 7th, whether it's like the wokies in Columbia University, or people who are, you know, part of Islam globally, or if it's people that are actually affected by the region. You know, they have Palestinian family, they have family in that part of the world. Like I think the last group of people I do understand, you know, like being like, if I was in that situation, I would probably like hate Israel as well. So like I get it, but you know, when it comes to like the woke lefties in Columbia University, in my mind, the only reason why they're participating in that kind of thing is just because, you know, they same kind of thing. Like the people on the left center their entire lives around envy. And because, you know, Israel does pretty well, because it's aligned with the United States, you know, these people hate Israel, they hate the United States for the sole purpose of that these places are like pretty awesome places to live, like overall, you know what I mean? And they're pretty like successful overall. They're pretty free overall. And, you know, to an envious person, that's something that needs to be torn down to the ground and destroyed. I think
that tons of great places around the world are successful. In Europe, for instance, and it doesn't trigger the same thing. Is there something different, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm not asking you to solve the mystery of anti-Semitism in 2 minutes, of course, but just interested in your...
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I made a really good video about this, which was like a psychological profiling of leftists who disliked Israel. I honestly don't remember what I said. This was a video that I made about a year ago, maybe over a year ago at this point. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think ultimately, getting back to what I was saying a little bit earlier in this conversation, maybe this is me just trying to fall back on this because I don't have a good answer. It could be that. But I think people on both the left and the right, again, just have like no real purpose in life. And
beyond. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's actually all I got. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's consistent to, you do have a consistent worldview. I mean, there's envy and disgust. There's...
I remembered it. I remembered what it is. My thinking with liberals in the West in terms of their treatment of Israel has to do with, has to do with their worldview of envy, and has to do with their worldview of power structures. Whoever is in power needs to be taken out of power. And as a result of that, like, you know, that's why leftists hate the West, hate America, hate Israel. They don't seem to hate China, which is a little bit of a strange thing. I think mostly they just don't know enough about it. And I think criticizing China,
they don't see it as powerful, maybe.
Yeah, but that's silly, right? China is like one of the most powerful like countries in the world at the moment, and I think the criticism of, I think that gets a little bit tricky maybe with the criticism of China and Russia, because then they have to go into potentially criticizing the like communism, which is again criticizing their own worldview. Maybe things get a little bit tricky there. But yeah, I think the general worldview of envy and the destruction of anything powerful in order to redistribute the wealth, it makes Israel kind of an obvious target as well.
I think many of them would own half of that. The envy part, maybe not, but many would say, yes, that's the way we approach politics and the world and the history of the world, through the lens of power. They're more powerless, they're less powerless, and there are more or less two categories, and you're part of the oppressor or the oppressed category. And that's a fairly explicit kind of postmodern, post-Foucauldian, however you want to call it, intersectional lens that's actually very well theorized. And I guess a lot of them would own this, depending on whether they are monist or multi-lenses. So whether they think everything is class, or everything is gender, or everything is ethnical oppression. So that would be the post-colonialist. The second one would be the feminist. The first one would be the Marxist. That's a consistent view of the world, and I'm not sure they would disagree with that. And it happens that the West, and I would say for the world region, I think it's not necessarily true to perceive Israel as being part of the West, but yeah, because they perceive it as dominant, they are in the wrong category. There is something. You tell me if you comes up with a question. I kind of preparing that show. I went online and read some of the comment, and one that kind of comes up a lot, not a lot, but a little bit. The accusation of you being a hypocrite. I'm going to read one. These guy says motivational content is bullshit, yet he does motivational content in the same video, selling stuff like success and financial independence and good relationships, etc. What do you respond to that? Are you a hypocrite?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, there are certain realities when it comes to doing business on the internet, right? I think something that I've realized is if I were to really start over again in order to like properly like really make money online, I would start a business, or I would start a channel where I was selling openly, directly from the very beginning, because the parasocial relationship is set up correctly right at the beginning. What I did here is I grew to like 50,000, 100,000 people, followers, trying to give them something deeper than what they had encountered on social media previously. And the reason I didn't start selling right from the beginning is because I wanted to be seen as someone that was like more than the average influencer. And on top of that, I just didn't know what to fucking sell. You know, I didn't go into this knowing like how I was going to monetize on the back end. And as a result, a lot of my audience was built out with the parasocial understanding that I was their friend. I was not someone that was trying to sell them a product. And on top of that, whenever I sell a product, because I talk about so many different things, like people follow me for like 10 different reasons. I'm not like I don't have a B2B business channel where I'm solving one problem for one customer and that's my target demographic, right? And as a result of that, if I ever like create something, like for example, I created a really fabulous like community last year called Metamorphosis that I've been doing like e-commerce products for a long, long time. I've never gotten reviews like I did with this. Like people were saying like, dude, like I was going to kill myself before doing this. And then like I did this program and I threw away my suicide letter. That sounds like fucking bullshit made up, but like I've just never done something like this before, and as a result, it was really humbling to be a part of. I was like, holy shit, like I'm really onto something here. But because I had set up that expectation with my audience that I was bigger than the other gurus, when it came time for me to sell, again, the parasocial relationship was not set up in such a way to be conducive to that. It's the same thing like when you try and sell like a pyramid scheme to your friends. It feels dirty because that's not how people like were interacting with you in the first place. So like, I have to say, when I was getting those types of comments at the beginning, it was actually really hurtful, and it really, really affected me to the point where I was like terrified of selling on social media more than once a month per platform. Like I had a lot of conversations with my team where they were like, bro, you need to sell more. And I was like, do not tell me what I need to do or need to not do. I'm selling to these people once a month because, like, again, I understood that the parasocial relationship was not proper for me to do that. And to this day, I'm correct. You know, like I know people who have 5,000, 10,000 followers on social media who are making seven figures. Dude, when I sell a product at this point, and this is maybe partially because I 180'd with my political beliefs, but dude, like selling a $27 product via anti-profit is like pulling teeth. It is crazy. And as a result, like, you know, it caused me to reflect what it is that I really set up here with anti-profit. And there is a way that I am going to use anti-profit moving into the future, but it is in the realm of it's going to act as a case study and a tool for studying how information is spread throughout society, instead of it being the main money driver for me, because I've just built out the wrong audience for it. Again, if I had a B2B, I'm building out a B2B channel right now on YouTube where I'm talking to traditional business owners on like social media stuff, just because like I'm finding talking to a lot of those people, they don't, they even in 2025, they don't know how social media works. Like they've had traditional businesses for like 30 years and they just haven't made the jump yet. And I'm really effective at talking to that demographic of person. And in fact, like this is how you know, I'm wanting to work with people who like have like real money to spend, who want to get into social media, because I am so deeply familiar with the systems and processes of like social media and how to like build out the teams like super fast and to be able to create content consistently, that like, you know, that's what I'm going to sell. But like, can I sell that to people who followed me originally because I was like, there is something deeper to Andrew Tate, you know? And then I try and sell them something in the future, regardless of how good it is. It's just, I set up the parasocial relationship incorrectly. So that's kind of a long answer. Hopefully that was somewhat enlightening though.
Absolutely, absolutely. So whoever posted that on Reddit or anyone else, you have your answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the last part of this podcast, the Doom quiz. So very, very short answers.
Great.
Kind of fill in the blanks first. Okay, the one thing people should really understand about social media is?
The more volume, the better. When you first start posting to social media, you have no idea what people want to hear from you or what they'll resonate with. So you need to test a lot of content in order to get the answer to that.
Awesome. What most people don't get about the current political moment we're in is?
That the institutions of America are being tested as to whether they are strong enough to actually repel authoritarianism. And that's a serious question that requires serious attention and answers from people who are willing to spend the time thinking about it and potentially fighting back.
Do you think they will? Do you think the institutions are strong enough?
No. Yeah, unfortunately
that's
not.
extremely sad.
We already see them being like falling apart, and as long as we have a complicit Congress, they're going to continue not giving a fuck about what the judiciary says. And honestly, even if someone like, let's say AOC wins in 2028 or something, just like the complete polar opposite of Trump, the way that Americans view these institutions is completely and irrevocably changed, at least for the next couple of decades. And I think with like as many technological developments that are coming down the pike and the ascendancy of China, like people are talking about us going into a multipolar world. I think we're going into a new unipolar world, and it's not going to be us. And as a result of that, you know, we're going to be hosed, and this is just kind of the beginning of that. That's kind of a doomer take, but that's what's up.
Optimistic. Awesome. Okay, let's back to the doom quiz. The one thing that makes me angry right now is?
Not really much of anything, man. Things are pretty good. You know what's funny? A lot of people think that I'm a really, really angry person, or like I'm always thinking that like the world's gonna fall apart or whatever. But even with the answer that I just gave you, right? There's always a next move. At least for the
At
the
least for
people who are like actually like trying to like create their own lives, there's always a next move. I'm a big believer in the idea of geo arbitrage. That's why I'm living in Indonesia. You know, the idea of like getting a Guatemalan citizenship so that I don't have to pay like territorial taxes, or getting a Singaporean citizenship and working towards that for 10 years because I really believe in what it is that they set up there. Like there's always a next move. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I think people watching my content, especially because it's in a short form setting, watch it and tend to think, oh my God, this guy's just the biggest doomer and complainer of all time. But I'm actually pretty happy most of the time. Things are good.
beautiful. So the one thing that makes me hopeful right now is
You know, I'll say this. I think because of the change that I've undergone in my own life over the last year, whether or not I trust humanity to save itself, I want it to save itself. And I think that's a big difference for me in terms of where I was last year. And I think, you know, something that I'm currently struggling with right now is, you know, again, if we want to speak in Nietzschean terms, like does the Uberman exist, and as a result, like, does the last man exist, and do those people need to be ignored? Or perhaps, like, can everyone be saved? I think the answer to that, at least for me personally, is the overman exists, and we should at least try to save everyone. It's not that you just neglect a portion of the population because you don't believe they have it within them. You always try and reach them no matter what, and even if that fight is completely futile from the beginning, if you could do so in such a way where you don't have to sacrifice your sense of self in order to do it, and you can have a healthy amount of distance between yourself and the people who you were trying to save that may never like be saved, let's say, you know, it's a fight. It's a fight worth fighting.
beautiful. So the next question is gonna hit differently. We ask it all the time, but what could make me question everything is
If the Judeo-Christian God came down right now and started talking to me.
this. I'm sure can be arranged wherever you are.
Yeah, no, that would, I mean, again, the biggest thing that I've been struggling with the last year is like how I conceptualize like the idea of God. And I've pretty much completely let go of like the idea of like of like my entire life, which is that there's like a white man in the sky taking care of me, wants me to believe in the Bible, all this stuff. And if that dude walked in right now and was like, yo, it's time to pay the piper, that would be a real doozy. I'd have to rethink my entire life setup again, which I would be very unhappy about.
Well, you'll have to create a new channel. Or change the audience again. Worst threat right now on Earth. One word. Or two.
China.
Okay, so
China.
on a scale from extinction to nothing changes, how do you see the future of the world?
I would say that it's somewhere in the middle. A lot is going to change. This is going to be one of the most transformative set of decades that human history has ever seen. Like, we are about to live through one of the most fucking exciting, terrifying times in the existence of like our species. That being said, I think we have the resilience and the wherewithal and the tenacity to rise to the challenge.
Yeah, guys, that's what I told you at the beginning. If people were unfamiliar with your content, might be scared by your mask, but pretty optimistic, happy, and benevolent guy from what I can see. Excellent. So, okay, snap recommendations. One book.
Oh, what am I reading right now? I would say Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche.
How surprising. One TV show.
Breaking Bad.
One quote. Your favorite quote.
Hold on, I gotta find it.
That's gotta be Nietzsche, that's for sure.
No, don't worry. I'm not that basic. All right, here we go. Woe betide those who live by way of examples. Life is not with them. If you live according to an example, you thus live the life of that example. But who should live your own life, if not yourself? That is from
By who?
Jung from the Red Book. Jung.
Nice. And one content creator other than That's Why and Anti-Prophet that you recommend people following?
Michael Millerman. I think he is a really, really great philosopher on YouTube at the moment. And I'm really, really enjoying his stuff. I'm actually part of his academy. He's really great and a really cool guy as well.
Awesome, man. Any last word?
Tell the truth with everything that comes out of your mouth, and tell the truth to yourself. If you can live by those two tenets, you'll probably end up in a pretty good place.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, everyone, for watching or listening to that podcast. A few of the references, at least the names that were mentioned were Nietzsche, Hume, Hume, Eva Illouz, Illouz, Finkelkraut, I'm not going to try and spell this, Google it, Weber with a Weber, a sociologist, and Durkheim. Am I missing anyone? I think that was it. I'm doing that, of course, as much as we can, because obviously That's Why is the news analyzed, and the way we do that is by trying to incorporate humanities and social sciences in the coverage of the news. So back to the sources is always an important moment. Man, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. A lot of food for thought and probably 10 ideas for other topics for other podcasts if you have an extra hour and a half to spare at some point. But let's start with that. And thank you, everyone.
Fabulous. Thanks for having me.
Follow That's Why, follow Anti-Prophet.